Snow grips Twin Falls, Idaho, as a silver sedan idles on the shoulder, headlights carving bright lanes through a white night while the driver's seat sits empty. Inside a corner coffee shop at 9:30 p.m., 19-year-old Pearl White unties her apron, tightens a red scarf, tucks her earphones, and gives a quick wave before stepping into the wind toward her silver sedan. A customer at the window watches her figure disappear between drifting flakes. A half hour later, a passing truck driver slows on a quiet suburban road when he sees the same sedan angled toward the ditch, engine running, exhaust ghosting into the dark. No driver, doors closed, purse and phone resting on the passenger seat. Police lights bloom across the snow and turn the road into a lit stage. A single long hair is lifted from the back seat and sealed. A parallel tire track that does not match the sedan is measured and cast before new snow hides it. A witness mentions an old loud pickup near the lot. Grainy traffic cameras catch a boxy shadow on the same road. Years later, cell towers will redraw this night minute by minute. A basement box will offer a bracelet with 2 letters that matter. A frozen shoreline south of the canyon will answer a question that hangs in the cold. The decade-long silence begins here, with an idling engine and no one behind the wheel. Who stepped into the narrow window between 9:30 and 10 p.m. when the engine kept running but Pearl did not return? How did one hair, one tire impression, and one old pickup lead investigators from a snowbound road to a name, a house, and a hidden shoreline? If you want to uncover these answers with me, like this video, subscribe to Unscripted Tales, and turn on the bell icon for upcoming episodes. Tell me the city you are watching from, and help us reach 5,000 likes on this story so we can push the investigation forward together. Sirens fade and flood lamps glare against ice as officers circle the sedan. The gear is in park. The driver's seat is empty. The passenger seat holds the small ordinary pieces of a life left mid-stride. Flashlights sweep once, then again, stopping at the back seat where a lone strand catches light and slides into a labeled sleeve. At the bumper, technicians map a tread that does not belong to this car and pour a cast while flakes try to erase the night. The tow cable tightens and the silver sedan climbs the ramp. Engine finally cut, heat slipping away into the open air. Behind the tape, a small town stands in heavy coats and quiet. A co-worker whispers that she waved goodbye. A driver says the engine was still humming when he stopped. An officer writes that the scene looks too clean for chaos. The road empties, the snow smooths, and a calendar of years begins to turn as this first chapter closes on a single truth. A car was found running in the cold and Pearl White was gone. Twin Falls sits inside a deep freeze, a small city wrapped in hard wind that sweeps down the Snake River Canyon. Streetlights glow through drifting sheets of snow. Traffic thins to a few slow beams that pass and fade. The cold makes every sound sharp. Doors shut with a heavy thud. Tires hiss over packed ice. Somewhere a siren wails and then the night swallows it. Inside a corner coffee shop, the day is ending. The bell at the door gives a soft ring each time someone leaves. Steam hangs over the espresso bar. A mop slides across a wet tile path. Stacked cups click together as the last dishes dry. Pearl White, 19 years old, unties her apron and smooths it flat with both hands. She loops her earphones, tucks them into her pocket, and pulls on a silver-gray puffy jacket. Then the red scarf. The same bright color everyone knows her by. She gives a quick wave to the 2 co-workers still wiping tables and walks toward the door with that small, tired smile people carry after a late shift. A customer near the window watches her step into the weather. Breath turns white in the air. Snow catches on her scarf and sleeves. She hunches against the wind and moves across the lot. Her boots leave neat shapes that fill in almost as fast as she makes them. The silver sedan waits in the far row under a cone of pale light. She reaches it. The small interior light comes on. She gets in and pulls the door shut. For a moment, the windshield fogs and the world outside turns to shapes and glow. Headlights flare to life and paint the empty spaces ahead. The figure in the window lifts a paper cup for warmth and keeps watching until the car becomes only light in the weather. This is the last clear sight of Pearl that anyone will give to police. A normal close to a normal shift. A jacket, a scarf, a car warming in winter. A short drive that should take only minutes. then a stretch of quiet road where a truck driver will soon slow down for a sedan with its engine humming and no one in the seat. What detail from that simple walk to the car will turn out to be the thread that holds the whole night together. A long-haul truck rolls along the quiet suburban road, wipers beating a steady rhythm. When its driver notices a silver sedan angled toward the shoulder with headlights burning through the snow, the exhaust drifts in a white plume. The engine hums. He eases onto the brake and pulls in behind the car. Windows are fogged at the edges. Doors are shut. No driver in sight. He looks through the glass and sees a purse set neatly on the passenger seat with a phone beside it. Screen dark. The dash glows. The gear selector rests in park. Everything feels paused in mid-motion, as if someone stepped away for a single minute and never returned. The driver calls for help and waits with hazard lights blinking against the storm. Snow thickens. Tire marks on the shoulder soften at the edges and lose shape. A distant siren grows and washes the scene in blue and red. Patrol units stop nose to nose with the sedan to shield it from passing traffic. Officers check for movement, peer into the cabin and confirm what the trucker already felt in his bones. The car is warm and empty. No sign of a driver along the ditch or across the road. They note the time. They write the location. They keep the trucker close and calm while another unit sweeps the nearby stretch with a high-beam search. More units arrive and the road becomes a work site in the snow. Reflective vests move through headlight glare, while an officer strings tape and marks a perimeter so the few late cars drift by at a distance. Footprints near the sedan blur and flatten as new flakes settle. The wind lifts loose powder and shakes it into the beam of a hand torch, making paths look used and unused at the same time. An officer photographs the angle of the headlights, the position of the steering wheel, the items on the passenger seat. Another kneels to study the shoulder where any tread pattern could still hold a line. The first notes go into the log. Engine running. Driver not present. Personal items visible. Heavy snowfall affecting trace impressions. Scene secured for processing. 1. Small trace at the edge of this road will refuse to disappear, and will point straight at the person who stood here tonight. Camera. Shutters tick in steady rhythm as officers circle the silver sedan. Every angle is recorded, every surface noted, every reflection of headlight on snow described in the log. The engine gives a low, steady hum. The gear rests in park. The dash glows softly while warm exhaust lifts into the cold air. A ruler edge touches door seams and window lines for scale. An officer calls out times, another writes them down, and the first page of evidence becomes a map of a car that should have been on its way home. Inside the cabin, a technician lifts a single long hair from the backseat with metal tweezers and settles it into a clear sleeve, label pressed flat with date, time, and location. At the front bumper, another pair kneels over a parallel tire impression pressed into the shoulder. It does not match the sedan's tread. Measurements are taken, close photographs made, and a casting compound is poured before the snowfall can blur the ridges. At the rear door, a dark fabric thread rests in the seam and is eased out with a fine tip. Near the roadside, a leaf, thin and mud-streaked, is lifted from the slush and bagged even though no one knows if it matters. Small things gather in careful hands because small things often outlast storms. On the passenger seat, the purse and the phone are photographed as they were found and then placed in separate containers. One kit goes to latent prints, another goes to digital extraction. Gloves change. Labels duplicate. Chain of custody grows line by line while the weather tries to erase the night from the ground. Footprints turn soft. The shoulder smooths. The tire cast hardens like a saved memory against the wind. The tow operator secures the sedan, and the engine is finally shut down. Heat fading through the vents as the car is moved toward the impound bay for a full search under lights by the tape line. An officer finishes the first entry and notes that the scene feels too clean for a typical snatch, less scatter than expected, more order than comfort allows. The road empties again as patrol units pull away one by one and the snow closes in over the shoulder. But the evidence does not belong to the weather anymore. Some answers are no longer out here on the ice but inside the dark phone now sealed in an evidence bag. waiting to speak when it is turned back on under lab light. Under lab lights, the dark phone from the passenger seat wakes and begins to give up its timeline. Technicians link it to an extraction device and watch a narrow chain of timestamps appear on the screen. The final outgoing message is marked at 9:47 p.m. to her roommate, a short promise that reads, "On my way." The location history ends within the same small zone where the sedan was found. A red pin fixed like a pin in a map that refuses to move. After that, the record goes silent. No calls, no texts, no social post, no background pings that would suggest motion. Either the device was powered down or it was carried into a place where signals died. The silence is total and immediate. They move through the rest of the data with the same care used at the roadside. There are no searches about flights or buses, no new accounts created, no bookmark trail that hints at a secret plan. Calendar entries show the coming week filled with ordinary things. A midterm note, a Saturday shift block, a study group meetup. Bank activity is plain and small. A coffee before work, a gas fill that afternoon, no cash withdrawal, no sudden transfer, no pattern of spending that signals a goodbye. At the apartment, her laptop is logged and imaged. The last browsing sessions are routine. Study materials for class, a playlist, a few clothing pages, chats with friends are about assignments and schedules. The tiny maintenance conversations of a normal life. There is no late-night search for town names far away, no lookups for bus depots or airport timetables, no stranger appearing in messages with urgent plans. It all reads like days that expect more days to come. In the summary, the analysts write what the patterns are already saying. There is no sign that Pearl intended to disappear. The final text confirms a path home. The red pin aligns with the car. The abrupt digital blackout fits a hand that intervened, not a plan that unfolded. The working theory shifts from uncertainty to a clearer phrase that changes the weight of the room. Forced disappearance, the question turns from where did she go to who stepped into that window of minutes, and how did that person move in a storm without leaving more behind? Detectives move from the impound bay to the people who saw the night unfold. Inside the coffee shop, the two staff members repeat the same simple truth. Pearl finished her shift, waved, and left alone. No one walked out with her. No one waited at the door. Her routine looked like any other late shift ending in winter. Patrons and nearby residents add sound to the picture. One remembers the heavy growl of an engine that did not sound new. Another recalls a red pickup idling near the far row where the silver sedan usually parked. Someone on a porch heard a door slam hard and then tires bite into packed snow before the noise slid away down the street. The details are small, but they point in the same direction. A truck with an old loud heart moving where Pearl's car should have been safe. Traffic cameras offer little comfort. Snow streaks across the lenses. Frames blur. Yet around 9:50 p.m., one camera on the route where the sedan was found catches a boxy shape with square shoulders and a tall nose. The plate is unreadable. The make is unclear. The silhouette matches the kind of older pickup residents keep mentioning. It is not proof, but it is a path. Back at the station, a whiteboard fills with names, times, and arrows. The red pickup thread is circled in thick marker and pulled through each account. A line runs from the coffee shop lot to the quiet road and the uncertain camera frame. Another line ties the parallel tire impression at the scene to a vehicle that is not the sedan. The board begins to look like a map someone drew in a hurry to keep from losing what matters. The working picture is simple and tense. Pearl leaves alone. A loud truck lingers. A shadowed pickup appears on the same road at the right minute. The storm hides what feet and hands did, but it cannot hide the pattern. One more set of eyes is about to join the search, and they do not care about snow or darkness. Before the tire cast has fully cured, teams are already pushing south and west toward the canyon rim. K9 units unload first. Handlers wrapping leashes around gloved wrists as the dogs catch Pearl's scent from a scarf taken at home and a sweater from her room. Helicopters rise into the iron sky, their rotors hammering the cold. And the FLIR screens glow with shifting tones that can turn a hidden body into a bright mark against the frozen ground. Maps spread across folding tables. Red grease pencil lays out a grid. Team leaders call sections aloud and volunteers step forward. Locals in heavy coats who refuse to stay inside while a neighbor is missing. The first day is a slow crawl through snow that bites at boots and turns every hill into work. The dogs lead, then falter where wind shreds sent into nothing. The helicopter sweeps, then banks, then returns to hover over draws and stands of pine that hold more shadow than light. Along the rim, people move in lines, tapping brush with poles, checking culverts, peering into crevices that feel deeper than they look. Radios crackle with small findings that could matter. A scrap of cloth. A fresh drag in the powder that turns out to be the wind. Footprints that begin and end where drifts thin. On the second day, a volunteer kneels and lifts a black knitted scarf from under a drift beside a game trail. It is bagged and tagged, a tiny lift of hope that travels fast back to the command tent. On the third day, another team finds a white women's athletic shoe near a slope that drops toward the river ice. It goes into a bag as carefully as the first find and follows the same path to the lab. Everyone waits for the call that could turn this into a path that finally leads somewhere. The results return like cold water. The scarf does not carry Pearl's DNA. The shoe does not match her size or her profile. The finds are from someone else or from some other time, and the hope they carried dissolves back into the wind. Crews keep moving as long as light holds. Dogs work until their chests heave and their paws lift with each step. The helicopter drains fuel and refills and goes back up until cloud and dusk erase the ground. By the end of the week, the map on the table is crowded with red squares that say, "We have already looked here." The commander stands in front of the board and speaks in the steady voice of someone who hates this decision and knows it is necessary. No new sign. Weather worsening, personnel exhausted, operations paused. The tents come down. The lights shut off. The canyon returns to its usual winter quiet, unbothered by the lines humans drew across it. With the ground giving nothing, the searchlight begins to swing back toward people, toward alibis and toward the small circle that knew Pearl best, who will be crossed off the board quickly and whose name will refuse to fade when the questions start again. When the canyon gave nothing, the focus shifted to people. Detectives started with the person closest to Pearl's daily life. Mark Jensen, the ex-boyfriend, arrived with eyes red from lack of sleep and a quiet way of answering each question. He said he was home watching a game with two friends. The team checked doorbell footage from the block and a late receipt from a nearby convenience store. The times matched. The friends matched. The route never touched the road where the sedan was found. Mark's name moved to the cleared column. Co-workers from the coffee shop sat one by one in the interview chair. Each told the same simple picture. Closing chores. A last sweep of tables. A wave to Pearl as she stepped out. The logs from their drives home lined up with traffic cameras that caught their plates turning onto other streets. Their phones stayed far from the shoulder where the silver car idled. They were upset. They were also clean. Neighbors around Pearl's apartment were checked for noise, arguments, any hint of trouble. One man 3 houses down drew attention because of an old harassment conviction. The file looked heavy, but the alibi was heavier. He was in Boise that night on business in the hotel. Cameras showed him walking in and out at hours that left no room for a drive to Twin Falls. His timeline locked. Shut investigators pulled phone records for the small circle that filled Pearl's days and weekends. GPS pings, call patterns, and text windows were spread on a table until each line found a place. Nothing crossed the red pin by the roadside during the narrow window, when the sedan sat with its engine humming. Bank checks were the same. No odd cash pulls. No late charges that tied anyone to the scene or to a hurried errand that matched a cover-up. The paper trail of Pearl's closest people stayed ordinary. Time moved and the first urgency softened under the steady weight of work without reward. The search maps came down. Cardboard lids went onto evidence boxes. A shelf in the archive filled with binders labeled with the same date and black marker. The case stayed open on paper but inactive in practice. Even so, one small object kept a place at the edge of every review. The single long hair from the back seat, sealed on the first night, a trace that felt like a voice too faint for the tools of that year to hear. Something that small can wait longer than any of us expect. And it can change everything when the right light finally reaches it. Tip line stayed open and busy. Calls came from highways, bus stations, and small towns 3 states away. People swore they saw a girl with the same scarf, the same build, the same quick walk. Each lead was written down, ranked and chased until the trail faded into ordinary mistakes of memory. A few tips sounded sharp enough to cut through the noise, but records proved they pointed to someone else. Weeks turned into months and the stack of dead ends grew taller. Detectives kept the case on a schedule of reviews. Every few months a small team unboxed the binders, spread maps on a table, and tried to see the night from a new angle. The same pages passed from hand to hand, the same photographs of the idling sedan, the same log lines noting a driver's seat empty, a purse and phone resting, a road swept clean by weather. Each review finished with careful notes and the same conclusion. No new lead of value. The file was returned to its shelf with the date stamped on the spine. Science tried twice to lift a voice from the single hair sealed on the first night. Mitochondrial tests were run, results compared and reported as incomplete. Not enough sequence to stand in court or to match a name. The vial went back into its box. The hair waited where it could not age and could not argue. The town did not forget. Every December, families gathered with candles and paper signs that softened in the cold. Local anchors told the story again on air, showed the same photo, and reminded viewers of the number to call. At church services and school gyms, people stood together and spoke about the fear that took hold after the sedan was found. Parents set earlier curfews. Managers doubled up late shifts. Doors that used to stay unlocked now clicked shut before dark. Inside the case notes, a phrase kept appearing in the margins. The scene feels unnaturally clean. No scatter, no panic, something practiced or something fast. That line colored every theory and kept detectives staring at the same few minutes, as if a change in focus could pull a hidden shape forward. Years passed without the one detail that could shift the entire weight of the file. The hair in its sleeve remained the smallest thing in the room, and the most patient. When new tools finally arrived, that patient trace would be ready to speak. 7 winters after the silver sedan was found, the smallest piece of the case returned to a table under new lights. The single hair from the back seat, sealed since the first night, was placed beneath a microscope and then into machines that did not exist when Pearl vanished. Whole genome sequencing began to read what older tools could not. Base by base the pattern formed. A clean profile that held steady across the run. Analysts compared it against Pearl's reference sample from home. It did not match. The hair belonged to someone else who had been inside her car during the narrow window when everything changed. The odd profile was prepared for genealogical comparison and uploaded to a database that maps distant kin through shared segments. Within days, the first distant cousins appeared. Within weeks, the branches gained names that repeated across Idaho records. Marriage licenses and obituaries narrowed the lines until one family node stood brighter than the rest. The Hale surname clustered near Boise and Twin Falls, a web of dates and addresses that overlapped the years the investigation cared about. From that cluster, a candidate emerged with the weight of alignment. Richard Hale, mid-40s, mechanic by trade. Former Twin Falls resident during 2012. Registration history once tied to an older red pickup that fit the sound and shape described by witnesses and hinted at by a blurred frame on a snowy camera. Paper trails alone do not prove a winter night. But the shape of the life on paper matched the outline on the board. The cold case team underlined the name and dated the margin. A memo went upstairs with a line that shifted the air in the room. Case formally reopened based on full genetic profile from recovered hair and genealogical placement of likely source. The boxes came down from the shelf. The board returned to the wall. The red pickup circle gained a new arrow with a name written beside it. The smallest trace in the file had finally pulled on something that moved. If this name truly belongs at the center of the map, Another silent witness from that night will have to agree. The towers that watched the roads while the snow fell. The smallest trace had named a family line, so investigators turned to another silent witness that never left the storm. Carrier archives were pulled again, not as spreadsheets buried in folders but through modern tools that read signal drift and tower handoffs with finer detail. The map lit with points that marked phones moving through snow. One red dot stood where the road bends near the shoulder where the sedan was found. Timestamp 9:40 p.m. The phone was registered to Richard Hale. Distance to the idling car was measured in city blocks, not miles. A clean sequence came into view. At 9:30 p.m., Pearl leaves the coffee shop lot and takes the short route toward home. Between 9:35 and 9:40, the silver sedan would have passed the stretch where it would later be found. At 9:40, Hale's phone pings a tower less than half a mile from that spot. At 9:47, Pearl sends the last message to her roommate that says, "On my way." Then the device goes silent. Moments after that, residents describe a loud engine and a hard door slam. The truck driver finds the sedan with its engine running and no one in the seat. The storm hides footprints, but the timings line up like teeth in a gear. Old reports had recorded Hale's statement that he stayed home all evening and did not go out. The tower data cracked that claim in a single frame. It did not place him miles away on a couch. It placed him moving inside the narrow window when Pearl vanished. Investigators pinned the new map beside the whiteboard. A line ran from the coffee shop to the shoulder. Another line ran from the red dot to the same road. Witness notes about an older pickup were taped under the timestamps. The pattern no longer depended on memory alone. It depended on records that kept time without caring who was watching. With the timeline tightened, attention shifted to the man behind the dot, and whether his history would read like a warning that had been waiting for years. With the timeline set on the wall, investigators opened older files that had gathered dust and looked for the shape of a person inside them. One report from 2009 surfaced from Ada County. A domestic disturbance where a girlfriend told officers that an argument turned physical, that a door was blocked, that leaving the room required pushing past a hard shoulder. The case ended without charges when cooperation faded, but the internal note from the responding officer stayed sharp. The behavior looked controlling. The temper felt fast. Traffic and patrol logs from 2010 through 2013 added late-night movement to that picture. Repeated stops near the Snake River Canyon after midnight. A broken taillight at 2 a.m. with the driver smelling of alcohol, but steady enough to take a citation and go. A winter stop where the red pickup sat on a deserted turnout with the explanation that fresh air was needed, and the view was good even in the dark. Each entry alone felt like a footnote. Together they sounded like a habit, a person who drove lonely roads when most windows were dark. Detectives knocked on past addresses and found neighbors who remembered small things that a file cannot hold. A woman across the hall who recalled heavy footsteps climbing in long after bars closed. A tenant downstairs who heard the pickup roar into the lot and a man stumbled toward his door. A young couple who pulled blinds when they noticed a figure pause too long beneath lit windows. None of these memories were crimes by themselves. All of them sat comfortably beside a timeline that put a phone near an idling sedan at 9:40 p.m. and a red pickup in the mouths of witnesses. The board in the squad room changed again. The circle around the red truck grew thicker. Dots of past behavior gathered under a single name, and the lines between them shortened until they touched. The story they told was of someone who stayed out late, drank hard, and pushed when told to stop. A person who did not fear the cold or the canyon or the quiet spaces where sound carries. Paper patterns can be argued, but metal and fabric do not bluff. And the next step would dig into the life of the truck that everyone kept hearing and seeing on the edge of the storm. Paper records became the road map. Investigators pulled the VIN tied to Richard Hale's old registration and followed it from one counter to the next. The file showed a sale in early 2013 to a small used lot in Twin Falls, then another sale to a private buyer, then a jump across the state line. Months later, the same number surfaced in Nevada on a stale registration that had not been renewed. A call to a tow yard on the edge of Reno brought a match. A weathered red pickup with flat tires, dust-hazed windows, and a VIN plate that aligned perfectly with the file. The truck was sealed, loaded, and brought under controlled lights. Technicians photographed every panel and every seam before the first door latch moved. Inside, age sat heavy in the fabric, but the method did not change. Swabs were taken, fibers lifted, floor mats pulled one by one. When luminol mist touched the passenger footwell, the surface answered with a soft blue bloom that held in place and did not wash away. The mat was cut in a clean rectangle, sealed and logged with a chain that ran unbroken from bench to lab. Days later, the report returned with the weight everyone felt building. The sample from beneath the passenger mat matched Pearl White's DNA profile. It was not close. It was exact across the markers that matter. A stain that survived years, and multiple owners had kept a quiet record of a night no one could see clearly through snow. Photographs of the glow were added to the board. The timeline on the wall now had steel and fabric to anchor it. Not just a camera shadow, not just a tire cast, but a direct physical link between Pearl and the truck that witnesses kept hearing and seeing on the edge of the storm. The red pickup stopped being a rumor and became a witness that did not change its story. With the truck speaking, voices from the first week would need to be heard again under this new light, and some details long forgotten would suddenly sharpen. With the blood in the red pickup turning rumor into proof, detectives walked the same streets they had walked years earlier and knocked on the same doors, this time with photographs and a firmer voice. An elderly neighbor at Richard Hale's old complex opened her door and studied the picture before she nodded. She remembered that winter night because the lot was a sheet of ice and the red truck came in too fast. Hale stepped out with a coat that was soaked at the hem and smeared dark at the sleeves. The kind of mud that clings when a person has been off the road and down into the wet edges. She remembered the sound of his boots on the stairwell and how long it took for the hallway to go quiet again. At the repair shop where Hale used to work, a mechanic wiped his hands on a rag and said the whole building was buzzing about the missing girl. And right then, Hale called in sick for days without a doctor note. When he came back, he kept to himself, jumpy, short on words, and he stopped bragging about night drives in the truck he used to love. Detectives returned to the coffee shop records and found the customer who had watched through the window that last night. The man looked at an old photo of Hale and did not flinch. The build was right. The eyes were right. He remembered a face behind a windshield that watched the lot too long, and a square-shouldered frame in a boxy cab. None of these pieces had carried weight in the storm's first days, but under the new light they lined up along the same rail. A muddy coat coming home late, a sudden sick leave that began when the town started searching. A witness who could finally place shape and stare together. Testimony that once felt vague now ran parallel with the timeline and the truck and the hair, each strand tightening the line to the same name. With voices awake and the vehicle speaking for itself, the next move would ask the suspect's own DNA to answer to the hair that waited in Pearl's car. With the truck speaking and witnesses aligned, the team turned to the only answer that could close the loop. They needed the man's living DNA to face the hair lifted from Pearl's back seat. A quiet operation formed around a small Boise house. Unmarked cars rotated at corners. Plainclothes officers learned his habits with a patience that did not blink. Work at a small garage? Groceries on weeknights. A bar on weekends where the same stool was often waiting. Every stop was a chance to collect what he would throw away without thinking. The first opening came at a gas station on a gray afternoon. He stepped out, bought a bottle of water, drank, and dropped it into a public bin. A gloved hand retrieved it minutes later and sealed it tight. Lab lights read a clear male profile from the rim. It was enough to point, but the team wanted a second pull that would stand even heavier. They waited through days that felt longer because the next reach had to be clean. It came outside the bar he liked best. He finished 2 cigarettes on the sidewalk, flicked them to the curb, and went back inside. Officers collected both, sealed them, and drove straight to the lab. This time the profile was strong and complete. When analysts placed it against the genome built from the hair in Pearl's car, the result landed without wobble. The same person, the same markers. A direct match between a strand left in a warm sedan during a winter night and a man standing under a Boise streetlight years later. The board in the squad room changed again. The line from the hair to the name was no longer a thin arrow based on genealogy. It was a thick bar backed by a fresh sample and a clean lab report. The circle around the red pickup tightened until it touched the name in the center. The case no longer leaned on shadows and guesses. It stood on records, on objects, on science that spoke the same way every time it was asked. With DNA locked, the investigation moved from streets to doorways. A judge would need to see this chain and sign for a deeper look inside the life that had tried to stay closed. Something in a quiet basement was waiting to be found. Something small and silver that carried 2 letters no one could ignore. Before dawn, a team rolled up to the small Boise house with a signed warrant and a clear plan. Unmarked vehicles boxed the curb. The door opened to a short exchange, and then officers stepped through with steady voices and a list of rooms to clear. The living room gave up little more than bills and tools. The kitchen table held a stack of receipts and a half-finished crossword. The search did not slow. They moved to the hallway, the garage, and then down the narrow stairs into a cluttered basement that smelled of cold concrete and old oil. Along the back wall, a low shelf held boxes wrapped in cloth. One small wooden box had a new lock on an old lid. It was lifted to a clean table under portable lights. Photographs first. Numbers assigned. The latch cut. Inside lay a careful arrangement that did not fit the rest of the house. Rings in soft pouches, necklaces coiled to keep their shape, earrings pinned to a square of felt, each piece lifted with tweezers and placed into its own bag, with a label that matched the entry on the form. At the bottom of the box lay a thin silver bracelet. A flashlight edge caught the inside curve where 2 engraved letters waited. P.W. The room tightened. An evidence tech read the older file note that recorded a mother's description of a gift given at 16, a silver bracelet with her daughter's initials. Dimensions matched.
Style matched.
The finding was photographed from every angle, then sealed with 2 signatures on the tape. Upstairs, electronics were collected into anti-static sleeves. In the garage, a tool roll, a bundle of tarps, and a box of assorted fasteners went into separate containers for later testing. A notebook with short cryptic entries was logged. Hair clips and a folded handkerchief from a drawer were bagged even though their story would need time to tell. Chain of custody forms filled with neat handwriting while the house grew barer by the minute. The wooden box closed for the last time with a new tag tied to its handle. The bracelet sat in its own container inside a locked case that left the basement under a guard's arm. On the command table, the board changed again. A hard link now tied the inside of this house to the young woman who left a coffee shop on a winter night and never came home, with a name matched by DNA and a personal item that could not be explained away. The path ahead narrowed to a single move that would put handcuffs on the man at the center of the map. Dawn is still gray when unmarked vehicles seal both ends of the quiet Boise street. The entry team moves to the porch with steady steps, a knock, a call-out, and a battering ram ready if the latch refuses. The door gives and rooms are cleared one by one. Richard Hale is taken in custody without a struggle, wrists cuffed, eyes scanning the hall as if searching for a door that is no longer there. Officers fan through the house with checklists. Phones and laptops slide into anti-static sleeves. External drives, tool rolls, tarps, and the small notebook from the bedroom table go into labeled containers. Everything that can hold a fragment of a winter night is sealed and logged. At headquarters, a metal table and bright overheads replace the basement shadows. Hale sits across from 2 investigators who have lived with Pearl's file for years. He begins with a flat refusal. He says he does not know the girl. He says he stayed home the night she vanished. He says he has nothing to add. The answers are short and fixed. The kind a person chooses when he believes distance will hold. Distance does not hold. The map of towers is placed between them. The 9:40 p.m. ping marked in red a few blocks from where the silver sedan idled. The officers slide the report on the hair taken from Pearl's back seat, and the lab sheet from the cigarette butts collected in Boise, the markers lining up without a gap. A photograph of the pickup floor mat under luminol follows, and the result from the lab that matches Pearl's DNA. The last is the small image of the silver bracelet with 2 letters that matter, lifted from the basement box and photographed in perfect light. The room changes when each piece lands. Hale shifts in his chair and rubs his thumb along the table edge. The first denials repeat, then thin. He tries a softer line that admits less than the evidence requires. He says it is possible she rode in his truck once. He says he gives rides sometimes. He says it was nothing that would explain the rest. The officers note the move. A step away from a hard wall is still a step. Time stretches. The questions circle back to the same minutes after 9:30 p.m., to the same road, to the same hum of an engine that kept running while a driver's seat sat empty.
Each answer that avoids the center is matched with a document that points to it.
The story on the table has weight now. It does not need raised voices. It needs the clock and the paper and the small items that kept their truth through years of dust and weather. When the session ends for the day, the shape of his position has changed. He no longer insists on never crossing paths. He now asks to see what else investigators think they can prove. He leaves the room escorted, and the team knows the first layer of calm has been stripped away. The pressure will return soon with a longer sit, a quieter tone, and a single request that opens a door no one could find in snow. A full account of how a short ride turned into a grave beside cold water. The room is colder on the second day. The metal table is the same, the files are the same, but the silence feels heavier. Richard Hale sits with shoulders rounded and eyes fixed on a point that is not there. The questions begin without rush. The same minutes are placed on the table again. The coffee shop at 9:30 p.m., the shoulder of the road. The red dot on the tower map. The floor mat from the pickup that glowed under lab light. The silver bracelet with 2 letters that cannot be argued away. He listens, breathes, and then lets the first piece out. He says he stopped because she looked cold and alone and he thought he could help. He says she got in. He says the ride was only meant to be a short one. The story tightens as he moves along it. He says her guard went up when the roads turned empty. She reached for the handle. He reached to calm her. There was a struggle inside the cab, fast and clumsy and full of fear. She struck the metal edge of the door with her temple. Blood appeared. Panic took over. He did not call for help. He did not drive to a hospital. He says he froze and then chose the wrong path because he believed there was no way back from the mess he had made. He lays out the decision that followed with a flat voice that makes the air feel thinner. He drove south. He left the streetlights and the houses and followed memory to a lonely stretch near Salmon Falls Reservoir, where night hides sound and snow hides tracks. He parked off the road and lifted her from the passenger side. He kept a small shovel in the truck bed. He scraped at the frozen ground until he made a shallow cut in the earth. He set her down, covered the shape with soil and snow, and walked back to the truck with hands that would not stop shaking. He drove home with the heater on high and the radio low. The engine roared in the lot when he returned because he pressed the pedal too hard. The coat took mud and slush at the hem. He went inside and sat until morning without light. When a map is placed in front of him, he stares hard as if the page might fight back. He draws a route out of Twin Falls and into the dark. He marks a turn before the water, a bend, a short side track. He circles a patch along the reservoir edge and adds a narrow line of trees as a landmark. His hand shakes at the start and steadies as the lines meet. He slides the map back across the table without lifting his eyes. The confession does not ease anything for the people who have waited, but it changes everything for the work. It gives a place, a direction, and a promise that the ground can keep proof when memory fails. Teams begin to plan before the ink on the map is fully dry. Lights tense, and careful hands will go to a shoreline that has been holding onto a winter secret for years. A red scarf, a fracture, and a set of quiet bones are about to speak for themselves. Teams reach the shoreline before first light. Generators thrum, and white tents rise against the water's dull steel. The map that Richard drew lies clipped to a board, its circle guiding boots to a low patch of ground near a thin line of trees. Grids are marked with twine and flagging. Every step is filmed. Every shovel bite is measured. The first layer is heavy with wet snow and shallow frost. Then the soil loosens, darker and damp. A gloved hand stops and lifts a fabric edge from the earth, a strip of bright red that has kept its color through too many winters. The scarf is brushed, photographed, and sealed. Deeper in the cut, another texture appears, torn silver gray with a stubborn metal button still hanging to its thread. Jacket remnants are eased free and placed into a numbered bag. A single white athletic shoe lies canted against the sidewall of the pit. Laces stiff, tread packed with grit. It joins the line of evidence on a clean tarp that is already filling with small truths. Bone surfaces next, pale against the soil. The crew slows to brushes and wooden picks. Hand bones first, radius and ulna folded close by. Ribs, some whole, some splintered at the ends. Finally the skull, lifted within a temporary support frame that keeps every line undisturbed. The remains are photographed as found, then again from each quadrant, then lifted as a unit with a quiet care that changes the sound of the site. Tags go on, forms fill in, chain of custody grows into a solid line from shore to lab. Under clean lights, a forensic pathologist reads what the ground has kept. A long fracture travels across the right temple, consistent with a hard strike against metal at the height of a door edge. Several left ribs show healed edges torn by force, a pattern that fits a body driven into a surface and held. There are no signs of a fall from height, no spiral breaks that would suggest a tumble-down rock. The injuries fit a brief violent struggle inside a confined space, the kind of space that matches a truck cab in winter. DNA work closes the loop that has waited for years. A sample from bone is compared to familial references preserved since the early days of the case. Marker by marker, the match holds. Identity confirmed as pearl white. The red scarf is logged as consistent with the clothing she wore when she left the coffee shop. The jacket fabric and button align with purchase records and photos her family provided. The shoe size matches her file. The grave holds her story, and the lab gives the story a voice that does not change with memory. The report that leaves the lab is both spare and heavy. Identity confirmed. Cranial fracture consistent with blunt impact at right temple. Rib injuries consistent with external force. Associated clothing and personal effects consistent with victim profile. The file that once felt empty around an idling car now holds a body, a cause, and a path that leads from a roadside to this cold ground. A judge, 12 chairs, and a room full of eyes are about to decide what the weight of these facts means for the man who thought snow could keep a secret. The courthouse fills early. Halls lined with quiet faces and a low rustle of coats that sounds like wind in winter trees. Inside, the prosecution lays its chain on the table piece by piece and lets the story carry its own weight. The hair from the back seat becomes a full genetic profile through whole genome sequencing. Genealogy narrows the family branch to Hale. Covert collection of cigarette butts confirms the same DNA belongs to Richard Hale, with a clean laboratory match. The red pickup's floor mat cut from beneath the passenger side holds a stain that matches Pearl White's DNA exactly. The cell record places Hale's phone near the shoulder where the sedan idled at 9:40 p.m. Witnesses add shape and sound: a loud old truck by the coffee shop, a muddy coat on a stairwell at midnight, a worker who noticed sudden sick leave when the search began. The bracelet engraved with 2 letters appears under the courtroom lights and sits still, while the room leans forward. Each item stands on its own, and then each item links to the next until the chain runs from a coffee shop door to an excavation by cold water. Defense turns to the first link and aims to weaken it in front of the jury. They argue that genealogy can drift, that family trees can be read the wrong way, that distant cousins do not make a name. The courtroom listens, and then the state brings the second link back to the front. The cigarette DNA is not a distant cousin. It is the same person as the hair left in Pearl's car. The court rules that the combined method meets the standard, because the foundation is not genealogy alone, but an unbroken series of laboratory matches that start with a single strand and end with fresh reference DNA taken from discarded items. The judge allows the full chain to stand. The video from the interview room begins. The first day shows flat denials that are steady until the weight on the table grows. The second day shows a man who stops pretending he was at home and begins to talk about a short ride that turned and a panic that followed. There are no raised voices on the recording. No pressure that crosses a line, only time, documents, and a map drawn by his own hand. The jury watches the pen circle a spot near Salmon Falls Reservoir. They have already seen what was lifted from that spot under a white tent at dawn. Experts step through their findings. A pathologist explains the fracture across the right temple that matches a blow against a door edge, and the rib injuries that fit force inside a cab. A digital analyst walks through the final text stamped at 9:47 p.m. and the silence that follows. A tower expert explains how a phone hands off through the network, and why a ping placed Hale less than a mile from the idling sedan. A crime scene tech shows how luminol answered in the truck footwell, and how the mat was cut, sealed, and tracked. Chain of custody forms move like a relay baton, signature to signature without a gap. The defense offers alternate paths through the same facts. Maybe the hair came from innocent contact. Maybe the bracelet was bought at a market without knowing its story. Maybe the blood under the mat arrived after the truck changed hands. Each maybe is held up to the record, and each one bends under the combined weight of timing, placement, and corroboration. Innocent contact does not explain a map to a grave. A market purchase does not explain two engraved letters that match a family report from years earlier. Late contamination does not explain a profile that fits the victim, and a confession that admits a struggle on the passenger side. Closing arguments do not need fireworks. The prosecution walks the jury down a short winter road, turns them toward a silver sedan with a warm engine, and hands them the chain link by link. The defense asks for doubt, but the story on the wall has begun to feel like a clock that kept time even when no one could see the hands move. The jury leaves with binders, notes, and the quiet knowledge that evidence has made a single straight line through a storm. 12 chairs sit behind a closed door as paper is passed and pens move, and the whole room waits to hear the words that will set the weight of a life. The jurors file in with careful steps, faces set, papers held tight. The courtroom rises and settles. Time seems to slow as the foreperson speaks and the words land with final weight. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of kidnapping. A long breath moves through the room like wind across winter streets. Richard Hale stands very still, hands on the rail, eyes fixed on a place no one else can see. Pearl White's family holds together at the front row. Shoulders lean in, hands lock. Tears find old lines that grief has already traced. Relief comes in waves that do not feel gentle. It is relief mixed with the ache of all the years that led to this moment. Friends lower their heads. Neighbors wipe sleeves across their faces. The quiet is full of feeling that has waited a decade to be heard. The judge speaks with a steady voice that matches the record built piece by piece. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sentence is clear and without edges to grip. Deputies move to the defendant's side. Steel clicks. Hale lowers his head and is led away through a door that closes on soft hinges. The room does not cheer. It exhales. Outside, the steps of the courthouse fill with people who watch the case grow from a roadside mystery to a bound book of facts. Candles and cardboard signs from past vigils feel closer than ever. Reporters speak into cameras while snow begins to fall in thin, slanting lines. In kitchens and living rooms across Twin Falls, the news travels and settles. Some parents hold their children a little closer. Some workers look at the clock on a late shift and think about a red scarf and a warm engine on a cold road. Inside, the family stands with a framed photo of Pearl that shows the light in her eyes before winter took the town. They feel the cost of justice and the small measure of peace it brings. There is no triumph here, only a certainty that the truth has been placed where it belongs and will not be moved. Microphones are being tested and a row of cameras is lifting into position, because an investigator is about to show how a single hair carried a voice across 10 long years. Cameras blink on, and a row of microphones faces a table stacked with binders and photographs. The cold case commander steps forward and holds up a clear evidence sleeve that once seemed too small to matter. A single hair from the back seat of a silver sedan preserved by care, carried across 7 winters to a lab that could finally read it from end to end. Whole genome sequencing turned a faint trace into a full profile, and patience turned a dead end into a doorway. The chain from genealogy to direct DNA match is explained in calm steps, from distant relatives on a family tree to cigarette butts gathered under Boise streetlight, from a name on paper to a person who could be asked the hardest questions. Slides move across the screen behind the podium, a timeline that begins at 9:30 p.m. and holds its line to 9:47, a cell tower map with a single red ping, close to where the sedan idled. A floor mat that answers in blue under luminol, a silver bracelet engraved with 2 letters that match a mother's memory. The presenter does not rush. She underscores a simple lesson. Preserve everything, no matter how small. Good chain of custody keeps truth alive longer than weather and rumor. New tools will arrive, and when they do, old evidence can speak. The department announces that the Pearl White case will live inside training rooms as more than a story. Recruits will learn to seal a strand of hair as if it is a voice. They will photograph tire impressions before snow erases them. They will log a phone and a purse as if the future depends on the order of labels, because sometimes it does. In-service seminars add a section on genealogical methods, how to consult public databases, how to confirm distant hints with fresh reference DNA, and how to anchor everything with traditional investigation, so science and shoe leather move together. Community members listen with faces that hold both relief and unease. Hands go up about vigilance and safety. A mother asks how to read a quiet road at night and when to call. A store owner talks about pairing staff on late shifts and walking together to cars. A teacher asks about curfews in winter months. The answers are practical and plain. Notice what feels wrong. Report a car that should not be there. Keep light on lots and cameras working. Small steps do not stop evil, but they shorten the time between act and answer. Then the questions turn to privacy. People ask where the line sits when police use genealogy sites to find a suspect through relatives who never imagined a courtroom when they mailed a kit. The panel does not dodge the weight of that concern. Policies are outlined that limit use to violent crimes and to cases where other methods have failed. Every genetic hint must be confirmed with direct samples from the suspect and built into a larger chain of proof. Courts review the process. Defense challenges the science. The protection of the community is weighed against the rights of the individual, and the balance is held with transparency and law. Reporters gather the last details. The commander closes with a message to families still waiting. Hold on to the smallest trace. Ask for proper storage. Keep calling. Technology changes. What could not be read yesterday may carry a full voice tomorrow. The room stands as the press conference ends, and the hallway hums with voices. Some grateful, some thoughtful, all a little quieter than before. There is still one thing left to say, a final look back at a quiet road, a red scarf, and the meaning of justice when it arrives late but refuses to be denied. The winter road is quiet again now. The headlights are long gone. The tire cast is hard as stone in an evidence box, and the red scarf rests in careful storage after a final embrace from the family. Justice arrived late, but it arrived. A single hair found on a cold seat spoke when science finally learned how to listen. A blurred truck and falling snow became steel and fabric and numbers that did not change. A map drawn by a shaking hand led to a shoreline that held its secret for years and then let it go. The jury weighed all of it and answered in clear words. The sentence set a boundary that will not open. For families who are still waiting, this is the message that matters most. Keep hope, guard the smallest trace. Ask for proper storage. Technology moves forward even when cases do not. What seems silent today can carry a full voice tomorrow. There is power in patience, and there is strength in communities that keep showing up with candles, with flyers, with careful eyes on late shift parking lots. Twin Falls will carry two memories at once. The first is a cold night with an idling engine and a driver's seat empty. The second is a courtroom where the truth stood up piece by piece and did not fall. Officers and technicians now teach new recruits to seal every thread, to cast every tread, to keep clean logs that can walk into court on their own feet. Neighbors keep porch lights on a little longer. Managers walk their teams to cars. Parents measure the weather and the hour and then make the call that sends a text sooner, a ride sooner, a safe door closing sooner. Pearl's name belongs to more than a file. It belongs to a life that was in motion, a week of notes on a calendar, a promise sent at 9:47 p.m. that never reached the door at home. It belongs to a family that can finally bring flowers without the weight of questions, and to a town that learned how thin the line can be between the ordinary and the unthinkable. The end of this story is not warm, but it is steady. The wind still moves across the Snake River Canyon. The streets still freeze and thaw. What changes is the way people watch out for one another, and the way a small piece of evidence can carry a light through the years. If you are still watching this story, it means this story deserves your like and your subscribe. Join Unscripted Tales and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a case. Please help complete 5,000 likes on this story, because this is a target set by my mother for you, so help me. It is totally free. Tell me the city you are watching from and share your thoughts about the journey to justice for Pearl White.